happening. You're trying to figure out ultimately what is.
It's still a mystery as to why it took them. Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Yes, Oasis, it is go time. I am Lauren Conlin. And as always, my co-host for Primetime Crime, Jarrett Ferrantino. Hey, Jarrett.
Good morning, Lauren. How are you?
I'm good. Look at my mug.
I have this Godfather mug that was given to me by my nephew, AJ, like 15 years ago. So I got to get one of those.
Yes, no, I told you I have one for you. I ordered it for you, like thinking that we're neighbors or something, and we're not. Sometimes my brain doesn't fully work at certain points of the day. So I need to get it to you so we can have our matching mugs. But
all right.
Yeah. Hi to everyone in the chat. Oasis, Sue, Sinead. So good to see you all. Sheila, Sal, Afton, all of our regulars. We have a lot to talk about today. I mean, really, we wanted to get into two specific topics, and both are pretty intense. We have Jarrett's favorite, Karen Reed, based on the hearing yesterday. There was some confusion. I think a lot of people are a bit more clear as to what's going on, but we'll have Jarrett get into it. And then Oklahoma, we got to talk about that, Jarrett, and how an alleged case of corruption involving a DA and a DATF agent, how that is tied to the murder case of Jillian Kelly and Veronica Butler. So we gotta get into it.
That's a pretty ambitious hour.
I know, right? I know. And I want to pin this. Sinead, thank you so much. You sent me a note about Jarrett and I on the Crime Nation doc. And, we were a small part of that, but I'm really proud of the work that we did there and just exposing this horrific and heartbreaking case to the world, I guess. I mean, it needs national attention because Jillian and Veronica's story is so far from over. So thank you.
Thank you, Sinead. I thought that was the people at Crime Nation. They do a really good job. They tell the whole story. They certainly advocate for victims. They don't just beautify defendants. I thought that it was a fair piece. I was really proud to be associated with it. And this week, they're covering the Hugo Selinski trial, which was my case, a case I prosecuted, probably the biggest case that I prosecuted here in Northeastern Pennsylvania. Probably the biggest case to hit here in 25, 30 years. So if any one of our regular listeners and viewers want to catch that, it's this week at 9:00 Eastern time on the CW. So we're really proud of that one. And it's
and you can watch it after too. If you missed it live, you can watch it on demand. So it's really easy.
Right.
And yes, it is a really interesting case, and it's not as popular as it should be because it's a very complex case, the Hugo Selinski case. But I do wish, and this has nothing to do with anybody at, on the team for Crime Nation because they tried, but I do wish that it was a little more focused on Jillian as well, just her memory but it's tough because I know that the producers reached out to a lot of people, but this case is so fresh and so difficult for so many people that I know that I don't think family and friends are ready to come forward, and I can't blame them for that. So.
Well, it's tough too when it's not adjudicated yet. People are hesitant because they may be witnesses in the case. They're prohibited from speaking out. And that really, it's one thing to tell a story like Selinski that was litigated 10 years ago, as opposed to something that's pending litigation and potentially for trial. So that's why I think to tell a story that way, as comprehensively as they did in a short amount of time, I think people are hesitant to talk prior to adjudication. So I think that had more to do with it than a reluctance, certainly, on anybody's part to tell Jillian or Veronica's story.
Oh, yeah. No, totally. And I think that, some of the people they got, like Veronica's aunt and her friend, they did an incredible job in sharing personal information about Veronica, with home videos and photos and everything. And same with Jillian. We did get to see some photos of her and her family, which was really nice. But and it was victim centered, which I was happy about. But yeah, I would have loved to see more on Jillian, but what can you do? But hopefully sooner or later. But so let's start with that then. Let's start with some Oklahoma alleged corruption and how it's connected to this case, Jarrett. So I'll just explain this very simply put. Oklahoma Watch, and I had never heard of Oklahoma Watch, but that means nothing. I'm from the Northeast here. So they put out this article, and it was from February 12th, 2025. Traffic scheme nets Texas County DA office million. So the DA in Texas County is DA George Buddy Leach, and he is the DA over 4 counties. It's Cimarron, Texas, I'm from Beaver County, and did I say Cimarron? I don't remember.
No.
Okay, in Cimarron County, yeah. So there you go. There's 4 counties, and Texas County is the biggest. I believe that's between 20,000 and 30,000 people. The other counties are much smaller. Like Cimarron County is like 3,000 people. It's crazy. So this DA is prosecuting Jillian and Veronica's case. And listen, I've heard a lot of things about this DA and certain relationships that I can't report on because I cannot prove it. And Jarrett and I have talked about this. Jarrett keeps me in line. I hear a lot and I believe these people. I do, but I'm not local. I don't live there. So I can't say with certainty, this guy has done this, this guy has done that. He's friends with these people. Sure, small town logistics. He knows at least 2 of the defendants that we are aware of. But public record shows certain things that pertain to these defendants, which would seem like the DA wants things to go in their favor. And I'm talking about previous cases, Jarrett. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Like Tad Pullum being arrested for feloniously pointing a firearm, which is a 1 to 10-year sentence, and he just gets off with a slap on the wrist and a $10,000 fine. And this is under the DA, Leach, and Judge Christine Larson. And Christine Larson was also the judge in Veronica and Wrangler and, let's say, Tiffany, their custody battle. So it's crazy. It's so crazy. So Oklahoma Watch puts this out and essentially says that through their investigation and research, and this is all public record, that they allege that the DA, along with a DATF agent named Kevin McIntyre, were allegedly running this trucking shakedown scheme in Texas County, Oklahoma, under the guise of a public safety program. And here's how it worked. Truckers were pulled over under questionable circumstances. Instead of receiving a normal ticket, they got this vague notice with no court date or fine listed, just a number to call. And then when they called, they were told they had to pay this inflated fine, $360 or more, or face a warrant for their arrest. Now, this alleged scheme brought in $2.1 million from 2019 to 2024 and bypassed the system entirely. So by keeping the fines off the books, the DA's office avoided federal anti-masking laws that prevent commercial drivers from hiding these violations. And one badass woman pretty much came forward and was like, this is weird. I don't understand what's happening. And because of her, I believe this was all outed. Now, directly from this article, and I can pull it up in a minute, it was interesting. Kevin McIntyre, the DATF agent, said this. Now, practically speaking, the role of the drug task force was whatever District Attorney Leach said it was. I've always said my job is whatever the boss tells me my job is. When he calls and says, hey, I need you to go and do whatever, that's what I'm going to do. And then they go on to say 2 days after Oklahoma Watch visited Diamond to interview McIntyre and retrieve official documents related to the warrant for this woman's arrest, the DA's office suddenly ended the public safety emphasis program, and Buddy Leach refused to comment on the story. Kevin McIntyre, if you're not aware, he was on the original witness list, the OSBI witness list for this case. And I remember seeing this, feeling some sort of way. I knew that Kevin McIntyre, again, guys, I know small town, but I I knew that Kevin McIntyre was very friendly with Tiffany Adams based on sources, based on the public record that they served on a very small hospital board together. And because he arrested Wrangler, he knew Wrangler Rickman. Tad Cullum sent him a video allegedly from a year prior to this arrest of Wrangler shooting a gun when Wrangler had already been arrested. So he has connections here. So I was not surprised to see these two names, along with the fact that Kevin McIntyre was also investigated for embezzlement in 2007, took a plea deal, and it seems to be wiped off.
Well, you said he was investigated. He was indicted.
He was indicted and took a plea deal. Yeah, exactly.
In
so
2000, so he gets indicted. He gets indicted in 2007, I think, only to return. So he gets indicted for stealing drug money. He gets probation, pays the $2,600 in drug money back, only to become the head of the drug task force again sometime later, which is, I mean, your population must be pretty small if that's the guy you go back to run your drug operation, right?
Jarrett,
I mean, you must
not
have
only that,
2 people, but
he was the interim sheriff for Cimarron County for a time. So you're absolutely right. Yeah, he goes back to running it, and he also is sheriff in the meantime. It's a little weird.
So here, a couple of things. This is what happens when a case of the magnitude of the Kansas moms comes to a small town. That town and the practices of its DA's office and its sheriffs and its cops, this is a collateral effect, become heavy. Same thing we're seeing with Karen Reed. All of a sudden, we're talking about all these cases out of that jurisdiction. So you may think someday I want this Super Bowl of a case to bring all this national attention to my town. Be careful what you wish for. I mean, we've had it in Luzerne County, and you could Google that and see where it led. Very similarly to the indictment of many public officials here. So that's a collateral damage. Here's what was really going on. I give a lot of credit to Tammy. Is it Voda? Voda, is that how you say her name?
I don't know how to pronounce it. Vada, let's say. I don't know.
So she is a no-nonsense, over-the-road trucker who has had a 21-year crystal clean career on her driving record. For those of you out there that aren't familiar with this, your driving record in that business is huge. You cannot afford one ticket if you're a CDL driver that drives over the road. It impacts your insurability. It impacts your premiums. It impacts your employment. I have companies that I represent that have logistic operations. So we have had to have these cases heard in court. So I've been on both sides of these things. I know what a detrimental impact a ticket can have. So essentially, looking at this process, the DA clearly knows they have these truckers, okay, by the coyotes, right? They're going to say, look, we're going to do a deferred prosecution agreement. They don't say that, but that's what it looks like. Here's a piece of paper written with crayon. Call this number, right? And we'll give you a $360 fine. This will never see the light of day. And you may think, well, this happens with speeding tickets all the time. Here's the problem. When you're driving a loaded, heavy, big rig across the country and you're covering up your violations, you are putting people in the public at risk. The spirit of this law, and there's a lot of BS in this masking, the intent of the masking law, and the masking law is this: you cannot avoid certain citations by deferring the prosecution. That's what the you cannot mask certain citations with calling them something else or a deferred prosecution, because the spirit of that law is to protect people on the road. Okay. How DA Leach claims his office got around this is, well, that only covered if it got to court. It didn't get to court. It never left my office. I had the discretion whether or not to bring the charge. That violates the spirit of anti-masking laws. Anti-masking laws are saying if you're speeding, if you're driving too heavy of a load on those streets, you need to be consequenced, and it cannot be covered up if you're caught. That's what was going on here. So to me, it violates the spirit of anti-masking laws.
Did you guys all get that? Because I really needed Jarrett to be the adult in the room and explain that. That was super helpful. So this is a bad look, Jarrett, right?
Well, that's before we even get to Kansas moms. Like, here's the other question. The bigger question is this. I want to know where the 2.1 million. So it raised $2.1 million. Where'd that money go? You got 5 agents.
Right.
So you're getting $500,000 a year, right? On average. You got 5 agents in that office. You cover 31,000 people. Okay. I'm sure there's an allotment for these salaries. You could forfeit things, all this stuff, right? Where did that money go? That's the next question. That to me is the more important question.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if you want to see if this whole house of cards is going to come down, if there's a bigger issue with Leach or McIntyre, you're going to find out with this thing. Now, if Leach is blissfully ignorant and says, hey, I had this process, it was a way for us to fund our drug operation and investigations, fine. People use creative ways to do that. And if he can account for that money, I think this is something that's going to resolve with a cease and desist letter. If he cannot account for that money, he's going to have a bigger problem. Every dime of it.
Wow. Okay. So this is interesting. I feel like I have a lot of questions here. This money seemingly, I don't want to say it was off the books because clearly we know what the amount was, so it couldn't be off the books. But this is my opinion, speculation. Are we supposed to believe that they weren't skimming off the top here and that wasn't the purpose of this, which is, I mean, I'm just going to say it again, guys, these are allegations. I'm speculating, putting it out there. I just don't, Kevin McIntyre's past, right? And Leach, from what I know so far, like we're just supposed to believe that they didn't document these tickets. It didn't go through the court system because of a certain program they were running.
Well, and I'm not suggesting that's the case.
Like,
I'm not suggesting that's the case. What I'm suggesting is somebody needs to go the next step and ensure whether or not, look, there is a plausible explanation. These guys figured out a way to sidestep masking laws, enter into deferred agreements with, see, truckers are non-residents. They're coming through a town. They don't have connections to that town. They're not, these folks could be from the East Coast and be like, the best thing I could do is just pay a ticket and not have it on my record, and you'll never hear from me again. Fine. And the next, to me, the most important part of all of this is from a criminal standpoint, from a liability standpoint, is where did the money go? I don't know where it went. I didn't look at the book. You don't think it's weird,
though? You don't think, I mean, honestly, and I guess I'm just asking you, like, just because of like the anti-masking law, you don't think it's weird that people were given a number to call and it didn't go through any type of system?
Oh, I think, don't get me wrong. I think the practice is suspicious. I think it's inappropriate. I think they took advantage of people, but I also think, what was your intent here? Like, there were 2 things in that article that McIntyre said. Number one, he said that Leach has expanded the role of the drug task force. Drug task forces, in my experience, which I've worked with them hundreds, if not thousands of times, are you take these groups of municipalities or counties that alone cannot investigate drug dealing that knows no boundaries. If it goes between towns, you're not constrained by typical municipal constraints or jurisdictional constraints. You join together, you're funded by a larger pool of money, you have vehicles, technology, things of that nature, but you're investigating drug trafficking. Leach then says, my drug task force is now going to prosecute drug-fueled crimes. I'm going to tell you something, folks, okay? There are 3 major contributors to crime: drugs, drugs, and drugs, okay? 99.99% of the time, it's drugs. So what Leach did is say, we are expanding the drug task force to include the prosecution and investigation of every crime in these 4 counties by saying.
But what does that have to do with truckers? I guess, like, fine, that's all well and good. But, you know, and just going back to the title of this article, which is not just made up here. I mean, the title here, it has the word scheme. Traffic.
Well, so here's what they're saying it has to do with truckers. So that's a great question, Lauren. The drug interdiction, okay, where we've pulled the most drugs if we're not going in and out of a drug house. Where you find drugs is you have interdiction patrols on highways and roadways. People are stopped, truckers too, okay, and they're stopped for certain violations, which then lead to maybe a consensual search, which is an exception to the warrant requirement, or an officer sees enough indicia of drug activity, they secure a warrant and then do a search of the vehicle. So there are a lot of drugs and monies taken off our roadway. So how Leach uses the drug work to expand into these traffic stops is basically we're doing drug interdiction work, which involves traffic stop. That's what Leach would say if he made a comment.
Okay, right. Well, he didn't make a comment, and the guy seemingly never makes a comment. And listen, I know where you're coming from. You are explaining this from a legal standpoint. You're defining these anti-masking laws, which is really helpful. And I do think that what you said is really important, guys. Leach has to account for every single dime of that $2.1 million. If he does not, that is a huge problem. Now, we've seen in our society, Jarrett, and this, mainly I've seen this for, I guess, sexual assault allegations, but clearly with the New York City mayor, he can be federally indicted and, not be removed from office, right? So you can be under investigation as a politician and not be removed from office. And also, obviously Eric Adams was elected. DA Leach, by all accounts, every article I've read about him says he was appointed by the governor. So he could be removed from office, right? He doesn't, there doesn't need to be a public outcry for this. He could just be removed whenever.
Well, I wouldn't count on it. First of all, his nickname is Buddy. I know a lot of people named Buddy. Every Buddy I know is a really nice guy. And I know a lot of Butchies where I'm from too. Just a point. But so I'm suspecting he's like in the club, this guy, okay? And I'm not from
good old boy. Is that what you're saying? He's
right.
Good old
So I'm going to bet this situation alone, absent an audit, is not going to result in his being removed. Okay. I just don't see that happening. Whether or not it's possible, certainly if you're appointed, I always say if you're appointed, you could be disappointed, right? You could be taken out.
Oh my gosh, that's another go in the corner. That's another one.
So, but the truth is somebody had the power to put you in. There is undoubtedly a process to remove you. Now, he's not been, let's be clear here. Buddy Leach has not been charged with a crime. This scheme, as it's been referred to, is certainly suspicious as you look at it. And I like this part of it. Tammy sounds the bell on this thing, right? McIntyre apologizes to her. Oh, you were confused. You're one of 300 plus stops we've made, or however many. I have the numbers here. I made so many notes I can't find my stuff. But here. So it says 6,934 people were stopped. Okay. One person sounds the alarm. She just didn't get the message that, it's just a deferred prosecution, right? Okay. So 1 out of 6,934 people.
Good
he
for
apologized.
Her. God, good for her.
So it is. It's great she raised this. So don't get me wrong. It's suspicious. It's concerning, but I want to know as an investigator, what is the rest of this? I want to show me where the money went. Show me more Tammy. Show me what she was given or he was given. Show me if somebody didn't accept the deferred prosecution, what happened? That's the other thing.
Right. No, I agree. And again, my brain right now, and some of you might be like, why is Lauren so obsessed with this guy or this DA and this DATF agent doing wrong? And I don't mean to hyper focus on that. But again, covering Jillian and Veronica's case since inception, I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of people. I mean, guys, I would say I've spoken to upwards of 100 people in that area for the last year. So I have thoughts, I have information, I have certain evidence that, that just points to things not totally adding up to me. And so with Veronica and Jillian's case, I was never happy with him prosecuting it. I thought maybe there should have been a special prosecutor, Jarrett, because of the fact that it is a small town and he knew the defendants. And and certain things when the women went missing, certain things raised some red flags. And also the relationship You know what? I should just stop. I should stop
Well,
now
let's just
before I
maybe
say
you should.
anything.
Maybe
But
you should, but let me say this
yeah,
too. Okay, and I get that. So
sorry.
what it appears. So let's look at what's today, the 18th. Let's look at today's February 18th, right? So let's look at where
Wait,
we
can
are.
you answer? Can you answer that by Nanya about what happens? Like, and I'm curious about this too,
Well,
Jarrett.
that's where we're going to go. I'm
Okay,
going to
all right.
answer that. That's an
Thank you.
important question. So
Okay.
the question is, what are your thoughts if something happens to Buddy Leach as far as Veronica and Jillian's case? Today, okay, is February 19th. I'm sorry. As of right now, it appears all 4 defendants are headed toward a plea here, okay, for a sentence of what I would probably expect is life. And all 5 are headed toward a plea deal, which is likely going to be the lion's share of their natural born lives in prison, which it should be. So all indications are is Buddy Leach is doing his job to this point, okay? He's not playing around with this cast of characters. That's what it appears on the outside. Now, we have not seen the plea agreements or the terms that are contemplated here.
Not officially.
Okay, but you have 2 innocent victims that were violently killed and kidnapped and in a planned attack that spanned 6+ weeks that we know of. So the only appropriate sentence for all 5 is life, or damn near close to it. Okay.
But Jarrett, remember Cora? They're already working out 30 years for her.
But again, why? What is Cora giving them in exchange? And if Cora is doing 30 to 40 years for this sentence, I'm saying, like, to me, it looks like Leach is doing his job. I've practiced in an area much larger than Oklahoma, but much smaller than Manhattan, where you are, right? Mm-hmm. We have 6,000-7,000 cases a year that would come through my DA's office. Of those 6,000 cases a year, you can bet I knew several defendants from my hometown or wherever. I don't live in a vacuum. I happen to know a lot of people up here. And just knowing them or being associated with people, or their kids go to school with your kids or whatever, sure, it's concerning sometimes, but it doesn't create a conflict. I mean, those folks met a totally different person when they got to the DA's office if they knew me on the outside. Buddy Leach, based solely on the size of something, it's 31,000 people over 4 counties. That's the size.
It's a little more. I think it's a little more than that. But yes, your point is well taken. Yes.
So imagine Buddy Leach is political. He knows a lot of people. Maybe he's a farmer or comes from a farming family. He's going to know Tad. He's going to know these people. Does that mean he's going to let them get away with murder? I don't know. But this scheme looks like he's willing to push the envelope, and certainly it's a unique system out there. The traffic judge, that whole thing it's wild. But our defendants here didn't exist in like the back alleys. They were active in that community. They were religious. They were farmers. They were on boards. They were political. They are going to rub elbows with that court system and leaders in your community. So you're going to have
Jarrett, I don't think, I mean, there are so many eyes on this case. He, at this point in time, right? At this, and maybe, a few months ago, you're right. He has to prosecute this case correctly. When they first went missing, I just wasn't, and when the defendants were first arrested, I just feel like there was certain things that I was not clear on with him. And again, McIntyre being on the initial witness list gave me some concern as well. And I remember I actually called the OSBI and I was like, I think you should just maybe look into this because there could be a conflict of interest here. And they actually said, thank you so much. We've heard this type of thing. And they were. So I'm not saying that he is not doing his job. I think that, Jarrett, and would you agree with this? There's certain times that you have to go through the motions in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. So where do we end up? Where do we end up with this current situation and this scheme, and how does it relate back to Kansas moms? So here's how. The FBI may or may not be looking into this. So it was reported up the chain. It went to Oklahoma State Police. Then it went to the Attorney General in Oklahoma. And then it went to the U.S. attorneys and the FBI. FBI says we turned it over to the U.S. attorneys, and they will not confirm or deny whether or not there's an inquiry based on this. We do know that it has since stopped the practice, okay? Was it the fact that Landline Magazine was looking into them? Was it the fact that Oklahoma, the reporter that wrote this article, Hallman, was looking into them? Or was it the fact that the U.S. Attorney's Office made a call? I don't know. But I'm telling you, stay tuned here. Your questions are legitimate and are important. We need more information.
Right. And I think that, so you're saying at this point, and I agree with this, just because somebody might be being investigated, and again, we'll never know. It's not like the feds tell us when they're investigating somebody, but everything, in my opinion, points to an investigation going on with this money. If they don't, I think that will be a huge problem, because it'll just draw more eyes, to this. And again, that article came out on the 12th. And when I posted on Facebook and it got so many shares, I was shocked that people in the community hadn't seen this. And I don't know how big Oklahoma Watch is. I looked at their Instagram. It's like 3,000 followers, nothing crazy, but
they're more than me.
Well, no, I just, I want to know what the traffic is to their site, because again, it just seemed like a lot of people weren't aware. But when I looked at some of the shares and what some people in the area were captioning, they were saying things like, I knew this was happening. This is just more corruption, this and that. And it does seem like people in the area are tired of it, Jarrett. They're tired of it, and they haven't, they've been scared. They can't push back on the police because they're the police. And, I am very much back the blue, but I also believe that corruption exists, and there are good cops and there are bad cops. And look, I got pulled over in Texas County, and I didn't even know what we were doing. I didn't even know we were speeding. I didn't even know anything. And when we got pulled over, the officer was like, "Oh, you were in court for the pretrial," and I was like, "Yeah," and they're like, "Go ahead." So it was interesting. I didn't know what I did.
And one thing I have to say, it's not a good look that they put McIntyre, after that embezzlement charge, back in charge of that office. I'm sorry, that's not. I mean, that guy should be, selling lawnmowers out there. You should not put a person back in the very position that they violated the public trust. And that doesn't mean a guy can't be reformed, but I mean, we're not talking about, he's running a lemonade stand here. He's back in, that's like putting a bank robber in charge of a bank. You wouldn't do that, right? No. I mean, it makes zero sense. It's a terrible look. So that tells me they don't care what it looks like. They're going to do what they want to do anyway.
Well, and you said it though, Jarrett. They've never had this many eyes on their small town and their small county before until now. And so, yeah, I just think, because people have said, what does one thing have to do with the other? Well, I mean, it's integrity. It's 100% integrity. How can we expect this to be prosecuted the way it should be when there's all these questions, I guess? And when you are being tied to something that's known as an alleged scheme, that's not a good look. And like you said, your right-hand guy here has been, charged with embezzlement. And I've seen this Facebook group that Kevin McIntyre runs, and they're very much like, look what we seized, look what we got, look at all these drugs. I mean, it would be interesting to know, what the process is after everything.
Well, again, I don't know him. I'm just telling you, based on his bio, it's not a great look. He may be the best drug agent out there.
Yeah.
For me, that's a problem.
Right,
because and part of perception is reality too.
And let's not forget that Tad Cullum felt comfortable enough to reach out to him to say, "Oh, hey, look at this video of Wrangler, from a year ago. He's a convicted felon. Maybe he shouldn't be using this weapon." And then McIntyre goes running to arrest him. It just seems, sure, you could say you're doing your job, but Jarrett, that I call bullshit on.
I know you have suspicions, and we're going to continue to follow it. But the one thing I would say is, if you're a good cop that does a lot of this investigative work, I'm not necessarily talking about a patrol situation, good guys and the bad guys. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like if I'm Buddy and I go to these, I knew Tad and I knew Tiffany, I'd be like, what the hell do you want me to do? You just kidnapped and killed 2 people. Like, what do you want me to let that go? This is not a traffic citation. Like, you're going to jail and you're going to jail for the rest of your life. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. You're right. But that was after when they were busted. I mean, who knows what went down before? I'd be interested to see his phone, honestly, truly. Look, I mean, yeah. And I see some people in the chat. Chaz, I totally agree with what you just said. And just quickly, I do want to pull this up, Jarrett, because this is Tiffany's. Let me pull this up. This is the docket for Cimarron County, and I see truly how many traffic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 traffic violations there. I mean, these are, God, it's kind of crazy how many times this woman goes to court. Another traffic violation there. And oh my gosh, Texas County, look at all these. Now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I can't even count them all. Guys, this is insane. What? That's literally insane. And if you go through them, and I've taken the time in the past to go through these, but I mean, you'll see she gets away with a slap on the wrist, and this is all under Leach. Speeding, I mean, it's nothing. It's literally, she just walks away. So
well, and now that's a lot. I'm not saying, and by the way, many of the killers that I've prosecuted have horrendous driving records. It's kind of goes part and parcel.
You think they're above the law, right?
But I don't know that traffic tickets like these that may be issued within town get to Leach's desk. I mean, I don't know how much, but these could be your
probably after that many. I would think the fine would go way up, and she would be like, "Yo, I need some help here." I mean, that's speculation, right? After those are all his districts. You don't think there would be anything that she could do to be like, "Hey, can you help me out here?"
I mean, I don't know. It seems like an excessive amount.
Yeah, you are so good. I'm very lucky to have you to keep me in line, or else I would probably go off the deep end. No, I'm just kidding. I would be responsible about it. But yeah, anyway, the next hearings, I believe, for a handful of the defendants are April. So I think, at that point, I think maybe we'll have an idea if they're, working on deals, and if the judge will sign off on these deals. I guess I'm a little confused at Cora getting a deal, because I felt like she didn't add anything to Paul Grice's testimony. She didn't tell us anything that we didn't already know.
A lot of it comes down to your respective role in the conspiracy too. I mean, they're all guilty, and they've all played an important role, but there are individuals that are principals and individuals that are accomplices. I mean, it's just the way it is. I think their actions were horrendous, but if you look at exactly what Cora did, or what Paul in particular did, Paul dug a knife into both victims. I mean, like, by his own admission, like, you don't overlook that. Yeah. So, and it has to do too with the timing of who came to the table first, who was forthcoming first. Cora came later, but her role was somewhat less than Paul's and Tiffany's. So, and Tad. So again, we're going to see this as it develops. We're going to cover it. And, but that factors
I don't know. I so disagree with you on that. If she's standing and, we heard she handed Tiffany a stun gun in court while, Veronica was on the ground. I'm like, man, like, no, I think that if I was on the ground there being attacked and I saw someone attacking me and I looked up and someone else hands them something, I don't know, I would feel the same.
And I'm not saying she's not culpable. I'm saying her level of responsibility is just logistically how this played out somewhat lessened. In the law, that's how they view it. And that may be why there's a deviation from life. That's all. Or she's giving them a piece of information they didn't have.
I understand 100%. And no, the Twombleys were not charged with anything relating to their daughter, because many of you know, if you follow this case, their 16-year-olds did speak to the OSBI and told them what she knew based on what her mom had told her. And I know that this 16-year-old is hailed as somewhat of a hero for coming forward. I think it's great she came forward after the fact. And I'm definitely not slamming a 16-year-old Jarrett. I don't want this to come out like I'm doing that, but I don't think that she's a hero. I think that she knew what was going to happen before, and she chose to keep that inside. Now, whether she did not believe that they would go through with it, that's one thing. It's not like these 5 that we know of were going around murdering people, or allegedly, right? So I get that, but I'm kind of like, let's not hail her a hero when she knew what was going to happen. And that, I don't know. Is that
There's
horrible
no
of me to
heroes.
say?
There are no heroes in this thing.
Yeah. Am I horrible? Like, I hope not, because I'm not bashing her. I'm just not going to sit here and say, oh, she, I just can't.
What did Kevin Costner say? It was a trailer for Yellowstone. He said, "There's no more angels, son, only devils." It's true in this one. It's just varying degrees of it.
Yeah. And I don't want to seem cruel to a minor, because I was a moron at 16. I'm not saying she's a moron, but like I certainly was. But
right. And you weren't raised by the Twombleys.
You know what? You're right. You're so right. Look at her mother and look what
Right.
So, right. Exactly. So I don't know. That's why I've just seen a lot of that. Oh, she's such a hero. Now she won't have to testify. No, you're a hero would be going to the police saying, look at, I heard, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, thank you. If there were heroes, the women would still be alive. Perfect. Perfectly said right there. But anyway, I could go on and on about this, but I do want to get to your favorite subject, Karen Reed. And yes, we will stay on top of this case. And if anybody would like to get caught up on my coverage and Jarrett's coverage from start to finish, you can go to Pop Crime TV. I have a Kansas Moms playlist. And also on Primetime Crime, we have a playlist there as well, where Jarrett and I go over a lot of the court filings. I have a storytelling type of playlist where I go over the case from start to finish. I talk about certain things that is all public record, by the way, that I found when researching. And that's another thing I want to put out there. When I put this article out there stating all of these facts with Oklahoma Watch and this and that, someone said like, oh, that's reaching. I'm like, I don't know what's reaching. Everything there is factual and can be backed up with
right. Draw your own conclusion.
Yeah, I don't know what's reaching when I just gave you just a statement of facts. But yeah, anyway, so we'll stick a pin in this for now. But Veronica and Jillian, we love you, and we are not going to forget about you or this case. So, but yeah, let's go to Karen Reed, the hearing from yesterday and what happened. Oops, just kidding. Let's go there for a bit. It was pretty wild, Jarrett. I think it'd be better if you talked about this.
So here's what's going on. There is a concept called reciprocal discovery. The state, if you're familiar with the discovery process in a prosecution, the state has to give the defense basically everything we have, okay? All the investigative reports, all the testing, all the science, everything. If the prosecutors file a reciprocal discovery request, if they do that against the defense is obligated to turn over certain information they have. Okay, so that's happened in the Karen Reed case. Okay, Attorney Brennan, the new prosecutor under Rule 14 in Massachusetts, has filed that reciprocal discovery request. It's a continuing request. It's not give us what you have this day. That document is filed. It is a continuing obligation to turn over to the other side information you have. In particular, Brennan asked for information related to the ARCA group, which was a group of experts that were utilized by the federal government in the federal investigation into the police and the Karen Reed case, not necessarily Karen Reed. Mm-hmm. ARCA was not an expert group procured by the defense. They are in the middle here. They're neutral. There are a group of individuals that were utilized by the federal government. Mm-hmm. Brennan sends a request to the federal government that says, can I have the information related to ARCA? They called it a TUI letter, to whom it may concern letter. That's what that's called. he didn't get the information. They gave him the runaround. He gives that same request to Jackson, the defense attorney for Karen Reed. In the first trial, Jackson is specifically asked whether or not he had correspondence with the experts from ARCA, whether or not he conversed with them about their testimony, and whether or not there was any benefit conferred to them. Were they paid for their testimony? And you may say, hey, defense attorneys pay experts all the time. They do. They do. And that information must be revealed. We must know what an expert was paid. You may say to yourself, well, they have conversations with the defense all the time. Isn't that a privileged conversation? ARCA in the Reed case are not your garden variety experts retained by the defense. They were utilized by the feds. They're in the middle of this thing. But Jackson in trial 1 says, the only conversation I had with ARCA, the only communication I had with ARCA was logistics. Are you available to testify this day? They never talked to them before they went on the stand. Now, on February 13th, Brennan, the prosecutor, comes into possession after a relentless pursuit of this stuff, by the way, finally comes into possession from Jackson of emails and a payment trail to ARCA for $23,000. So Jackson paid them $23,000. That's what's being claimed. And there were these email exchanges between the expert and Jackson talking about the testimony. Should I say this? Should I not say this? Should we talk about pedestrians being hit at night?
So I wrote down when I rewatched it last night. So the June 22nd, they were corresponding, Jackson and Dr. Wolf, about his qualifications and his resume and the payment, right? The payment, this is just what I've seen from just different things online, that this was a retainer for airfare and hotel and whatever. I don't know. I mean, but that's a lot of money.
Where'd they stay? That's
right.
a high
so,
retainer.
No, it's really interesting. So I don't know. But then when Brennan goes on about this outline and about, them talking about the testimony, that's when judge interrupts and says, what is the date of this? And he says, I don't know. I don't know the date. I was like, don't all emails have dates? That's confusing to me.
No, it was an attachment. So I think what Brennan was talking about was the attachment itself was undated. That's what he said. And there's no date. I don't know when it was. So that outline was probably it was provided to him by Jackson.
Yeah.
So Jackson gave that to him in. Okay, so
I saw a reporter.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that comment in a second.
Yeah.
So whether or not he did, this is Brennan's position, and how this plays out is this: they didn't provide this information in the first trial. Jackson said he didn't communicate with them in the first trial. Brennan's position now is that was a lie, potentially. Okay, and he needs to have all of the information on ARCA. Here's a couple important points. He's not afraid of their testimony. He said, I don't care if they testify, which is okay. He's saying, I am entitled to know if they're bought and paid for, if they're biased, okay, if there was a promise, if there was compensation, if there was a reward, an inducement, favoritism, any kind of collaboration. And he is. Because if the state was doing that, we'd have an obligation to turn it over. If the defense is doing it, they have an obligation. Judge Bev was actually shaking at the end of that hearing. If you look, she comes out, she takes her glasses off. She is really rattled by those emails. She was very surprised.
Didn't see them though. That's the other thing. So, okay, going back to that, he says all this, and he also said, he received everything from the federal government, right? He says, they sent this to me. And then she says, okay, we're going to take a recess. She comes back from the recess, and that's when she's shaking and she says, I have grave concerns. This is going to be very serious for the defense counsel and the defense. That's when she's shaking and says, basically, I interpreted that as, let's hold until you guys can come back, possibly Alan Jackson, with your own lawyer, right? Like you bring your own lawyer here.
Well, I'm going to tell you, it's
But
judges.
wait, but then,
go ahead. Sorry.
But then Brennan says, oh, by the way, I want to correct something. It was Jackson that sent me those emails, not the feds. She did seem a little more relaxed, but then she says, okay, can you send me those emails, directly after this, the ones that you got? So what did she read? What happened in that 30 minutes?
I'll tell you what I think happened. Well,
Yeah.
First of all, she knows what Brennan was reading to her. So that was concerning. She goes back. She probably pulled the section of the transcript that Brennan was referencing in trial 1, where Jackson made a series of statements. Now, Jackson did not appear nervous. In fact, he's arguing with her about the convenience of coming back for this next hearing. Well, I'm not available on the 26th, so to me, he did not appear nervous, and I didn't see the press conference outside. Somebody said he didn't make a payment to them. Fine. And again, he's no fool either. So I don't know what the truth is, but I could tell you this. It does not appear that this was only a conversation about logistics. Him talking about whether or not I should mention pedestrian accidents at night with the expert and things of that nature, that's beyond what he represented happened. When did it happen? Was it after he made those statements in court? We'll have to see. Here's the issue here, is lawyers have an obligation to be candid with the tribunal. We have an obligation, number one, to be professional. We have an obligation to be honest with the court. You cannot say, and I'm not saying Jackson did this, but you can't say something didn't happen or you don't have a document if you have it. Okay. That violates, because there is a leap of faith here. Judges don't have the luxury of being mind readers. You have to have faith in the professionals that practice before you. So when somebody violates that, which the argument is Jackson misrepresented the truth about the nature of his communications with ARCA and whether or not Brennan should have this information. I looked at this, it looked really bad. As it played out, as Jackson reacted, I started to say, well, I've been in these hearings. I've been in these hearings where documents were mistakenly unsealed and, our lawyers are arguing bad morals and things back and forth. It gets hot in there, okay? It seemed to me there was some walking back of this. It's entirely possible he didn't have this information. It came after that hearing. I don't know, but it looked a little better toward the end.
Yeah. And I guess that's when I was just like, well, if Jackson misrepresented everything, didn't Brennan also misrepresent it to a degree by saying, I got all this info from the feds, which if I were a judge, I would be like, holy crap, you went to go to the feds to get this information. The defense didn't turn it over like they were supposed to. So, and then again, I did feel like I saw her relax a little bit. Also, the fact that Alan Jackson didn't jump up and say, Your Honor, because Hank said, I just it'll take less than a minute. Let me just explain. I wonder why Jackson didn't jump up to do that, just to clear the air, I guess. And maybe.
I certainly would have. I don't know why he didn't, because it sounds like Brennan did get certain documents from the feds, though, prior to February 13th. He said he kept sending them those letters, and every time he kicked them, a nickel would fall out, right? So I just think potentially he misspoke, and because there's definitely something that got him on the trail of those emails. There's something there. I don't know what it was. And then he said, I didn't get these documents till February 13th from Jackson's team. Jackson didn't seem to, the guy's a great lawyer. He's composed. I don't know. The fact that he didn't get up and get into a back and forth with Brennan, I don't know. He may have been learning why he didn't get up and say, I sent you these things when he said the federal, he probably told him when they had that break.
And then obviously he knew what he sent, I would think, and he would be prepared to argue that and prepared to say, okay, let me explain. I'm not really sure.
He may not know what the Fed sent Brennan, though. He may not exactly know what the Fed sent Brennan. So he may think somehow they had him. I don't know.
Right. I'm just pinning all these comments. We've got, I love that we have people who really believe that she's guilty and people that believe that she's innocent in this chat. I think that's really interesting.
For purposes of this conversation, though, Lauren, it doesn't matter, because this is about a fair level playing field and whether or not
Right.
people are following the rules. Before you get to the merits, if the process isn't right, throw it all out. Throw the baby out
Right.
with the bathwater because it doesn't matter.
Right.
So whether you're a Karen Reed or you're the guy that dresses up like a minion on the lawn there, it doesn't matter because we
Right.
have to have a level playing field of justice here for this to be done right. This is going to work out. It's going to resolve. And what are the options here? So if this was just a matter of a discovery violation in trial 1, the judge is going to admonish Jackson. She's going to say, you need to make sure every piece of information you have is turned over. I'm going to review it with you, with my clerk, whatever. And if any failure to turn it over, I'm telling you, I'll report you to the supervising state licensing board. You can have ARCA's going to testify, okay? But all of this information will be made available to Brennan and will make their biases and anything subject to fair game. So, and that outline's going to come in. Isn't it true? You filled out this outline with Attorney Jackson and you talked about what to say and what not to say here today. Isn't that true? And isn't it true we had to pull, teeth to get this documentation? And all of that's what I just keep pounding them on to chip away at whatever they're saying.
And people in the chat, I mean, Afton, I'll let you know thoughts on the Turtle Boy juror interview in a second. But Oasis said the Sallyport videos, why is Hank so scared for the truth to come out on that? And, I guess a lot of people were really shook. I mean, I was shocked when that video was inverted. I was like, how is this not a bigger deal when they're talking about the tail light on the left, but it's really the right. I mean, it was a little crazy. So, it's interesting and really quick. I just want to play this. Let me share. I put a short up yesterday. Somebody put this up for me so I could just play it back. It's like 20 seconds of Jackson from the first trial when he questioned ARCA and he kind of set the stage for their relationship.
The defense didn't have anything to do with that, correct?
Correct.
You'd never met us, didn't know who we were when you did this.
Correct.
You'd never met Mr. Lally, didn't know who he was when you did this.
Correct.
Your analysis, opinions, testing, and conclusions were requested by a completely separate agency.
That is correct.
Okay, so I mean, he's not.
That could all be true. Everything he just said is true.
Right?
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was interesting where. Sorry, stop sharing that. He wasn't lying. He kind of said, I never hired you. They never hired you. You came up with your own conclusions and we had nothing to do with it. He didn't say, I mean, we never, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but you're right. If he didn't turn it over.
That's not the portion that Brennan cited though. Brennan talked about a specific request with regard to, I don't believe that's the portion he cited, but
I don't think so either. I just was pointing that out, but you're right.
That's why people don't like lawyers. See how delicate he danced around that, but that's the right thing. That's what I would, and by the way, when he said it's an independent agency, you may say, well, why didn't he say the federal government? Because he couldn't say that. He could not say that. If he said
one of the witnesses actually spilled the beans on that, which was funny. I think it was Ryan Nagel on the stand, but Jarrett, I know you didn't see this, but Turtle Boy did interview a juror from the first trial. And it was super interesting the way this juror saw things. Cause I mean, I was surprised. He thought that ARCA and Dr. Russell were almost a distraction. And I was like, wow. But he did say that the jury instructions were unclear and they were whatever it was, 8-3 on manslaughter and both unanimous on the murder and the leaving the scene. So I thought that
which we've suspected too, and that's been widely reported.
And what's funny? So I haven't shared this yet. This is just a little exclusive share. But when I went to Fashion Week last week, a show, and it's this designer Zhang Toy. He's more of like he dresses a lot of the conservative media stars like on Fox News. I did see Judge Jeanine, and Judge Jeanine got a lot of heat for the way that she promoted the Fox Nation Karen Reed doc. And when I say she got a lot of heat, she got a lot of heat from the people who think Karen Reed is innocent. And that's because she did say a few things that were not exactly accurate. And so I see her and I'm with my husband, whatever. And I'm like, all right, wait here. I need to go talk to Judge Janine. And, you know, I was in the first episode and a little bit of the second. And so I went up to her and I was like, hey, and I don't really know her. I've never really met her, but I thought maybe she would recognize me. And she's like, don't know who the fuck you are. And I was like, awesome. Well, I was like, I was a part of the documentary. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks so much. And I was like, I would love to just let you know a couple things about the case and what I've observed because I followed the trial. And she's like, oh yeah, no, I didn't really follow the trial. So we started talking and look, she's scary. She's very kind and nice, but she barks when she talks almost like she's angry, even though you're having a discussion. So it's really funny. I had to sort of get myself regulated with her, you know, she's not arguing with me. She's pointing things out, but she was just talking legalese, I guess. She was speaking from a prosecutor standpoint, a judge. She's talking about this rule, that rule. And I'm like, yeah, cool. I'm talking as a juror, a lay, an observer, what I observed. And it's people like me that are going to make the decision of Karen Reed's fate. You know what I mean? So it is funny.
Well, look, I think Judge Janine's certainly entertaining. She's famous. You know why she's famous other than the fact that she's on TV? The Robert Durst case, a case she never brought, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
She's famous for looking into Robert Durst. He was never convicted for the murder of his wife, Kathy, of which if anybody saw The Jinx, it's so phenomenal. The first season in particular is phenomenal. Second gets a little long in the tooth, but Judge Janine is famous for a case she never brought. And again, I'm not knocking her for not charging him. You didn't have a body in that case, but really her dogged pursuit of Durst is why. So it was something that never played out in a courtroom, never played out in suppression hearings and things of that nature. I mean, she's talented, she's funny, and again, one prosecutor to another. It's nice to see. What I like about Judge Janine is that she doesn't fit into that typical mold of the blue suit, black shoe prosecutor mold,
No, but she certainly sides, with the defendant is guilty because I believe, and you're not really like that, which I think is commendable. But a lot of prosecutors or former prosecutors are like, oh, well, she's got to be guilty because of XYZ. And I'm like, but I just feel like it's so much more nuanced than that as an observer. That's all. And yeah, whatever. But I just thought that was so funny because my husband's like, all right, she doesn't want to talk to you. Like, just move along. And I'm like, okay. And she was so nice about it. But like, it really is very intimidating just to talk to her when she's like, this rule, that rule, blah, 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 whatever. So
she goes from not knowing you to just spouting off like legalese at you. Oh boy.
Oh yeah. And then she's like, we should keep talking. I gotta go by. And I'm like, yeah, let's keep talking. Yeah. But I was like, you win, please. I cannot debate you on this. But anyway, yeah. Well, Jarrett, this was great. This was a nice catch up. I feel like there was just a lot to talk about, two different things in this hour, and there's just so much more going on, but we can connect next week and see what the cases of the week are. So,
and remind everybody, watch Crime Nation tomorrow night on the CW at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're doing the Hugo Solinsky case, which was my case. So check it out. If you want to understand what's wrong with me, it's that case. I live with the scars of that one. So check it out.
Now you guys have to watch. Seriously, now you have to watch it.
It went our way. I don't want to spoil it. Check it out.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited to see it. But anyway, thank you all so much. We really appreciate you. And thank you to new members, Sinead and Forrest, who's been a member for, I think it said 7 months, which is so awesome. You guys are great. Don't forget to like and subscribe Prime to Primetime Crime on YouTube and Pop Prime TV. So we will see you guys next week. Thanks so much. Bye, Jarrett. Bye, guys.
Happening. You're trying to figure out ultimately what is.
It's still a mystery as to why it took them